If you ask your questions, state your name, your organization if you'd like. And then we know that some of you guys are recording. That's perfectly okay if you're as well, just for records. We just ask if you are recording, make sure it's not connected to anyone else in the room. And of course, this meeting is meant to be a community update. It's not a media interview. If you are with the media and you'd like a statement or a formal anything really from the company or speak to Matt over here is going to be handling media inquiries afterwards. So just let him know and he'll get you whatever you need. Let's see, what else? If you guys can silence your cell phones, that would be great. And then lastly, and I hopefully don't have to say this, but we're going to say it anyways, but respectful communication is the only way that we're going to have a productive meeting. So we just ask if someone's speaking, allow them to finish, and of course, wait to ask questions until the end of the presentation. And then finally, we have a zero tolerance policy for language that may be harmful to members of the community, and we reserve the right to remove individuals that use language under the following categories: hate speech, inflammatory speech, profanity, and harassment or threats. So nothing comes anywhere close to that, but we just have to remind everyone ahead of these meetings. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Hillary and her team, and we'll get started.
Hello, I'm Hillary Young, Chief Engineer, Land Protection Division at Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, and this is my team at the Land Protection Division. I'm given the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Britton. I'm the Risk Management and Groundwater Manager in the Land Protection Division.
And I'm Jim Wilkins. I'm the Program Manager for the Hazardous Waste Permitting and Corrective Action Section.
I'm Mike Shortick in the Land Division. I'm an environmental engineer that's been assigned to help with the refiners determine the
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I think community involvement in environmental issues is really important, and we appreciate you taking time to come to this meeting and participate. And this is HF Sinclair's meeting to update the community on its cleanup progress, things that they've been doing since the last community meeting and moving forward. And these community meetings are going to happen on a regular basis to keep you in the loop on what's going on and progress at the sites, so you know work is getting done, and you know you don't feel like you're not getting informed on things. And while this isn't DEQ's meeting, we are here to answer questions concerning groundwater and soil cleanup and record corrective action permit. So these facilities are large, complex facilities. They have permits across DEQ. They have a permit with air quality, a permit with the water quality division, and we're with the Land Protection Division, and our focus is groundwater and soil cleanup and record corrective action. So if you have questions about air emissions or questions about discharges or wastewater treatment plant or water quality impoundments, then those are for our air quality division or water quality division. We won't be able to answer those because we don't have the expertise in that, and we want to make sure you get the correct answers. So, and finally, I just want to say that if you have an environmental complaint, we have a process to handle, a formal process for handling environmental complaints. And you can call a complaint into our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-522-0206, or you can go on our website at deq.ok.gov and you can file a complaint that way. They're logged into a system and they're tracked, and they have to be resolved within a certain amount of time. Now you can complain anonymously, or you can leave your name. If you complain anonymously, you won't know the outcome of the complaint because we won't know who you are. So if you leave your name, someone will stay in contact with you and let you know how it's resolved. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to HF Sinclair.
Thanks, Hillary. I appreciate your opening remarks. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight at this public meeting. I see some familiar faces out there from my recent meetings in November 2022 and April 2023. And it's great to see all of you again, and it's great to see some new faces too. I appreciate everyone being here. My name is RCRA, and with the help of my colleague, Brian Moore, we'll be providing you an update on, as Lily said, the record, specifically the record program at the HF Sinclair East and West Refineries, where we've been progressing this program. I've been with HF Sinclair for 6 years. I've worked in remediation for over 30 years. I'm a hydrogeologist by training, and I put those skills to use every day at Sinclair. My official title is Corporate Environmental Specialist, and I've been working with Brian on the program here, on the record program here, for over 5 years. Today, I'm excited to show you the progress we've made since November. If you remember, we had a meeting in November regarding it was our first meeting on the community update for the record program. And you will also see there's work left to do. We have quite a bit of work we've done. We've got quite a bit to do. But we're working on the supervision of DEQ over here to follow up on these remediation activities in the coming months and years. And we'll continue to provide updates through these community meetings. It's a very important program to us, to the DEQ, and I'm sure to the public since you are here spending your evening with us. I'm going to let Brian introduce himself and present the first few slides. As Amy said, please hold your questions till the end. When we finish the presentation, we'll have about an hour for Q&A about the record program and the presentation. So thanks, everyone, for joining, and over to you, Brett.
Thank you.
Watch the board.
Yeah. I'll watch the board. Got my notes sheet here so I can keep track of what I'm doing. So my name is Brian Moore. I'm a longtime resident, so I was over 40 years. I've worked with HF Sinclair, I'm working on my 34th year right now. This is my home and this is where I raised my family. I'm currently in the environmental remediation, working with RCRA and others on our team in the environmental department. I've held several other positions in a refinery, and so it's been a good transition, and I'm really proud of all the work that we've been doing here. See if I can get to this. So with that, like our scene said, there's a number of folks in here that we've met over the last couple of times and some new faces. So just real quick, we're just going to kind of give an overview of HF Sinclair as we stand right now. We're pretty much a mid-continent corporation. Besides Tulsa, we have several other refineries and pipelines and what have you. And Tulsa itself runs and produces diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, and asphalt. It's used by our state, our local economy, and some of it is pipelined out. Another really unknown for everybody is that our facility also produces lubricants, and there's a wax that comes out of the crude oil, and that's used in candles, fire logs, and et cetera, and what have you like that. There's other non-wax-free oils that are used for gear oils, motor oils, engine oils. They go to trains and what have you. And a little bit of food grade that's shipped to our other facilities to help with producing food grade oils. So with that, we've got about 650 full-time employees, give or take, just about any time, and we average about an 11-year tenure. So we've got a lot of long-term employees that are supporting their families and kids out of the local area, and then we contribute about $486 million in state and local taxes and revenue. In partnership with United Way, the Iron Gate, Habitat for Humanity, local elementary schools, and the Tulsa Food Bank, and the Walk for Cure, and several others that other folks are interested in. Most importantly, I'd really like to emphasize that our top priority across the operations at HF Sinclair, not just Tulsa, but all of our facilities, is to make sure that people return home from work every day safe, just the way that they came in, or in better shape, and show a good caring for our community, and we're environmental stewards for everything that we do. We take our job very seriously. We take the environment very seriously. Along with this meeting that we're having today, is a place of progress and a testament to our dedication to what we do every day. So the last thing, a brief history. I think everybody knows that Tulsa was built on oil. We have two facilities that are separated to but one facility. Both of them were built, in the mid-1900s or early 1900s. Progress. There's been a number of owners and changes through name and everything. But currently, right now, we are HF Sinclair. about 18 oil refineries along that whole belt along the river. So it's, we've changed and we've grown and we've adapted. So the thing that I'm really probably most proud about right now is that, over the last few years, we've really dedicated our time to environmental stewardship and adhering to our wind permit and making sure that we do our cleanup right. So in January of 2022, we had a permit modification for that south cap that some folks know about and have talked about. And we had a community meeting where we met a number of you for the first time. And then in November of 2022, we had just a public update meeting on where we're, kind of where we're at and what we were doing. And then in April of 2023, we had another permit modification for our north cap that we're currently in the construction of right now for an oil seep into the river, which we'll talk about here in a number of slides. And then, here we are today with another update meeting to inform you of where we're at, the progress that we've made, and just to show you a little bit more dedication of what we're all about. So with that, I'll turn it back over to RC, and he's going to come go through some of our progress.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. With that, some of the progress we've made. We're going to try not to get too technical. It is a very science and engineering-based field, but I'll try to keep this high level, and then when we get to Q&A, we can go from there. Those of you who've been here before have seen this slide. I think it's a really good introduction for the people who are new, and even people who've been here. RCRA, so I'm going to go through some acronyms throughout this thing. So we love acronyms in this business. So that's the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It's the federal law under which our permit is written, and that's what we work under with DEQ. We're going to go over the corrective action overview. And that process is a three-step process. Keep it simplified. We investigate, investigation. So we find out what's there. We paint a picture of what we've got. We do risk assessment. That's the step where we determine if or to what degree there is risk to human health and the environment. And then the third step is called corrective action. And that's most of where our work is right now. We're in that third step, corrective action. I may use the word remediation, I may use the word cleanup, they're all the same. So corrective action, remediation, cleanup, all the same terms. That's where most of our work is right now. And then you see this cartoon over here. So I'm going to give you a little picture of what's underground. So Brian and I don't literally work underground, but our work is basically from the surface down. So that first layer here, soil and soil gas. So everyone probably knows what soil is. And then soil gas is just the air between the soil pores. Then we got something, it was a long name, light non-aqueous phase liquids. So it's light, it floats. You'll hear me call it L-MAPL. I may call it oil. For simplification, it's oil, whether it's gasoline or crude oil or diesel. You'll hear me say L-MAPL a lot. That's oil. It floats on top of the groundwater. That's where the L comes from, light. So it's lighter than water. Then between the soil layer and the bedrock, this is the impermeable bedrock layer we have out here, is the other layer that we do investigation, risk assessment, corrective action on, and that's the groundwater layer. So that's where the soil pores, instead of having air in them, they're full of water. So we got soil, then groundwater, we may have some L-MAPL, and then we got bedrock. So that's your kind of three-step process, and three layers we look at. See if I'm going the right direction here. All right, slides after this are going to go into a little more detail on this progress we made, but our focus in this meeting today is progress since November. When we were here in November, we gave you an overview of the East Refinery and the West Refinery and the whole history of the RCRA program there. And now we're going to really focus on what we've done since November, in the last 9 months. We've expanded the oil recovery program. We've completed, I'll get into what a biosparging test is, but we've completed one biosparging test and we're working on another. That has to do with groundwater, and I'll get into that in a little bit. We completed some soil excavations. We finished that south cap before the last meeting. Now we've done some inspections of that south containment cap. When I say south, we have a south cap and a north cap. The north cap is under construction. Brian will go over those two, and they're relatively south and north of what's gonna be the new Zink Dam and the new pedestrian bridge. So, these are 5 really key things we've done. We'll dive into all of those. Here's a little picture. Some of you are probably aware of this coffer dam out there from different news stories you may have watched or whatever, and this is where the north containment cap is gonna go in. So that's looking toward downtown. So I won't spend too much time on this. 2 key things regarding our RCRA permit. Again, for the East Refinery and the West Refinery, we have a RCRA permit. This is the federal permit under which ODQ then regulates us by. Key thing Brian mentioned was in 2022 we got a new permit. It's maintained on the DQ website. It's a corrective action permit. And then want to just focus on June 2023. That's when DQ approved. We submitted a permit mod. That was our meeting in April, if you remember. We went through, came over here. A bunch of you guys are here. Guys and gals are here in November. I'm not talking to you, so. And in June of 2023, DEQ approved that permit modification, and as of July, we had started construction of that containment cap, and Brian will talk to you about that containment cap more of the Zink Dam here in just a bit. So I have 2 slides on this fun acronym LNAPL, or for simplicity case, just think of oil. So, now I'm going to focus on, you see blue, that's something new since November 2022. So we started that oil recovery program in 2008. And these green boxes are where we have wells. A well is a pipe into the ground. It's got openings as you get close to the groundwater. It's where you can either pull groundwater samples out of the ground or you can recover oil. So a bunch of these are already here. We've been running them for 10, 15 years or so. Most recently, we've added battery 17, battery 15, and apologies, I forgot to mention. See this orange? This orange line. Maybe a little difficult to see this orange dash line right here, and then it's a double dash line up this way. That's our bentonite clay barrier wall. So once that wall was installed in 1974, this part of the wall, and then the city installed an additional part in 1992. That wall, once that wall was installed, it prevents LNAPL or oil from migrating any further than where it's at. So this is a good place to recover oil, and Brian worked really hard this year to get number 17 and number 15 area pumping more oil. So the emphasis here is we're expanding the recovery program for oil at the refinery. This next slide will also do the same. So all these squares you see, we've been pumping oil for the last 10 or 15 years and recovering it from the ground. We send it back through the refinery process. So we essentially recycle it. We're going to start this thing called the vacuum recovery program. So you might not see this is the vacuum truck. Some of you guys might know what a vacuum truck puts a really high suction. You can connect it. These are like, well, these are the wells, the vertical pipes in the ground. And you can think of the vacuum truck essentially as it drops a straw down the well and it puts a vacuum and sucks the oil and water out of the ground. With the goal being to recover more oil. So expanding, progressing the oil recovery program at the refinery. We're going to start with 21 wells, and we're going to start that program in the next month or 2. So that's going to be, this might be a surprise to you guys. So it'll be in the semi-unlocked report you get next week. But we want to get more oil out of the ground. Goal of ours. More acronyms for you. SHBOOs and AOCs. So when you start a RCRA permit, early on in the RCRA process, you identify areas that you're going to investigate. If you remember, I had that 1, 2, 3. You identify areas you're going to investigate, and then you go through the process. And RCRA has these terms called Solid Waste Management Unit, SHMU, Area of Concern, AOC. These are RCRA terms. RCRA defined these terms way back when they created RCRA. And then we identified some. We've closed a bunch. We're working on 3 of these right now. And I'll give you a little orientation too. Not long to me. So the river's right here, flowing south. Here's New Zink Dam, and the new bridge right here. So PSO's properties here. This is the east side of the refinery, of the East Refinery. We got Solid Waste Management Unit H here. We got AOC number 2 right here, and we got Solid Waste Management Unit C here. And since November, again, just focusing on since November, we've done some excavations of soil that exceeded certain standards and were required as part of our risk assessment to excavate the soil from this box, that blue box there, and this blue box here in AOC 2. We're still working on this solid waste management unit C. So those are the solid waste management unit in AOC is working on. So if you remember, we talked about the matrix. The last two slides are oil, LNAPL, this is soil. Again, progressing the program, accomplishing things. We did those excavations in December last year, and we'll be reporting to the DEQ in the near future. And we're still working on this solid waste management unit C. Groundwater. All right, I might try to slow down. I apologize, I talk kind of fast. So, someone at the DEQ once mentioned that to me, so. I'll try to slow down and drink some water. Groundwater. So we got this another acronym, POC well. So that's our point of compliance wells. So if you can't, again, here's the river going south. Here's Southwest Boulevard, just to give you some perspective. Southwest Boulevard, the river, and here's the refinery, and here's PSL's property. So if you take the refinery boundary and the PSL boundary, you can see the blue dots, I hope, and if you can't, just imagine about 42 blue dots around those two properties. Those are what we call our point of compliance wells. That's where we have to meet certain standards according to our permit to DEQ. So that's our focus when we talk about groundwater, is the point of compliance well. So two really cool things we finished is this biosparging pilot test at this well area. And we're about 2 months away from finishing our 6-month pilot test at this area. Pilot tests are essentially ways you test to see if something, you decide you have a remedy. You have some kind of remedies you can do for groundwater, and you might go, we like that one, that might be a good option, and you do a little test and see if it works or how well it works for the parameters, and then you can, if it works really well and you're going to apply it, you go through and work with DEQ, and then we may expand and do biosparging as one of our remedies. I haven't decided that yet, but that's what we do. So you're probably wondering, what the heck is biosparging, right? So, got a little cartoon for you here. See these black lines, those are wells. So here's your well, here's your screen. So the well's open down here, and we put oxygen in there, and we pump those with the bubbles. And then there's this really cool thing in the ground, some of you guys might not know about, but there are naturally occurring bacteria that degrade hydrocarbons. Keep in mind, hydrocarbons are carbon, so they're an energy source. But these bacteria, which are these little yellow Pac-Man here, just to go with the cartoon theme, they work much better at degrading hydrocarbons when they have some oxygen. I was joking with the guys earlier, like, we all work much better when we have oxygen. Well, these bugs like oxygen, so, you give them some oxygen, and then they're able to degrade more hydrocarbons. So we're just kind of enhancing the natural occurrence. So again, we did pilot tests for 2 areas. We're trying 2 different areas. One's complete, one's almost complete. We get a report to DEQ. These are steps in the progress of the groundwater program. We also done some sampling, and we're going to do some more sampling. As you know, our program is around the perimeter, and we're doing some additional sampling, kind of pieces of the puzzle. A lot of this it's puzzle pieces. You fill them in, and you keep the program moving. The other thing I'd like to emphasize is all of these wells get sampled twice a year. You might not have it exactly right, but it's been about 12 or 13 years. So about 26 times these wells have been sampled. So we have a lot of groundwater data. It's a very thorough groundwater data. We have a very good idea what's going on with the groundwater. The most recent event was in April, and we submit those reports to DEQ every 6 months. So that's kind of the picture of groundwater and what biosparging is. It's kind of you might have seen a lot of these slides or different iterations of slides. This is a new slide. I made the slides, so I kind of love the slide, but it also gives you the steps and shows you the progress. So, groundwater progress, the next steps in compliance with the record program. So, we identified 12 steps. The blue ones are the stuff that's complete. We have done a thorough and complete effort on groundwater investigation. We do the simulated sampling. So these 2 items, that's complete. We do this on a regular basis. These next 4 are in progress. As I said, we finished 1 pilot test, and by the end of September, we'll be done with the other one. We'll report that to DEQ on biosparging. Just some extra sampling in addition to the regular 42 wells we do. Then these two next steps are really critical. We're starting to, but we're gonna have to dive into what's called a risk assessment. So if you remember that 1, 2, 3, investigation, risk assessment, remediation. Those are the 3 steps. So we're gonna do a risk assessment for groundwater. You evaluate the impacts to, potential impacts to human health and the environment. Then you look at remedies. So, a lot of people are interested in groundwater remedies. So then you look at remedies. You might look at 3, you might look at 20. It's kind of a process. You evaluate those remedies. That's kind of what the pilot test is for. So if these 12 boxes we've either completed or are in deep progress on 6 of them, and then the rest of these will show the remedies. So we'll either design a remedy, you gotta have some engineering, you gotta have some science in here. You go through a permit mod, so this and we'll keep you guys updated. So this was probably a slide you'll see from here on out, keep you updated on how we're going. So then we gotta do a permit mod with DEQ, and you guys will get to come in, do this document called the groundwater management plan. But key thing is then we'll eventually move into remediation system construction and then start some groundwater remediation, beyond what's happening naturally with the bugs. So just real focus here is we've done a lot, we're making progress, and we acknowledge we got more to do. So we're moving through the process. And with that, I'm going to give Brian the next 3 slides, and relax for a minute and drink some water. So, all you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I think everybody's aware of the south, as we're calling it, the south containment cap that's on the south side of the Zink Dam and Gathering Place Bridge. It's a physical barrier that's preventing hydrocarbon from seeping into the river. It's completed in September of 2022, and it's working as designed. It's inspected regularly. Our SMR, our semi-annual monitoring event that RC spoke of, has all the inspecting data, and everything will be submitted with that report. The other part is that in December last year, 2022, another seep was identified due to the extremely low water in the Arkansas River and the drought conditions that we had. Immediately, boats were put into the river, and as time, we hurried and hustled and completed a new coffer dam to help containment of those booms in the river, just for river fluctuation and rise and fall of the river. The coffer dam build right here kind of puts it into a little pond and makes it a little easier to control booms and water flow in and out. So at this time right now, we are working on, we started a month or so ago with building a new containment cap. Exact same design as the south. It's a proven technology, it's patented, and it works. So they're out there right now, starting up in here, and we're expecting completion December, somewhere thereabouts. So as we go on here with this, progress for us is continuing and it's moving forward. And it's actually starting to accelerate. We're getting a lot of reports done. We're getting a lot of investigations completed. And so now with those risk assessments coming up and everything that we've done, we're really starting to accelerate into the physical part of some of this corrective action. So, and we're, HF Sinclair is really, proud. I am proud of all to be a partner of Tulsa and to maintain good relations in environmental stewardship. The remediation implemented to the date right now is working effectively. More to come, no doubt. We have, like our senior said, we have some risk assessments to work through and some more work to do, but we're progressing and we're on it. We do have a plan for this progress. It's going with our record permit and established guidelines, and we're going to be working with the DEQ to maintain this and progress forward into the future of Tulsa and all of our family and kids. If you have any questions, please send them to the Tulsa feedback that aren't answered here.
Test. Test.
Okay, I know a few of you came in after we gave the initial guidelines, but we're gonna just go around the room, raise your hand if you have a question. Matt will walk the mic over to you, and just if you can state your name and your organization if applicable, that's all we need to get going, so. Who would like to kick us off?
My name is Guy Burgess, and I'm a resident of Tulsa. And if we go back to your, I think it's your slide 4 of the vacuum extraction of the groundwater wells. Yes. 11. So my question is, you said you had 26 wells around that you're doing vacuum extraction from, and are those done on a? Are they done on a time schedule? So it's not a continuous lowering of groundwater elevation and extracting the El Napo. Get a little bit more information about that.
Yeah. So the areas you see with the areas for everyone, I'm happy to answer that. So it's a good question. The areas you see in green boxes have one or more wells in the ground where we have pumps that skim the oil off into tanks. That's the green boxes. So there's one or more, how many total wells? Probably 30 some wells where we're skimmer pumps work on a regular basis. And then this vacuum program is new, and we're gonna start with 21 wells that aren't part of these green boxes in other areas. Might be one here and one here and one there, one here and there, you know. So additional 21 wells that aren't part of these skimmer pumps, for whatever reason, the skimmer pumps don't work in those wells, so we're just enhancing the program.
So it's an increase of your ongoing groundwater lowering and El Napo recovery. It's not, when I saw the truck, I thought, how are you moving from well to well, and what was the schedule that was done? This is a new process.
Yes, it's an increase of the oil recovery program. Yes, sir.
And on your slide 13, you're talking about your new biosparging operation. And what do you consider, you said it's a test, what are you considering as the whether the test is successful or not? From my experience, normally biosparging is used when the source of the El Napo has been removed, not in a situation where it's a continuous supply of hydrocarbons into the groundwater.
Well, our initial review of the pilot test, and I appreciate it, it's a great question. Our initial review of the test is it's being very successful. So, even with the presence of the El Napo in certain parts of the refinery, it's working very well. The oxygen is getting in there. We've done these tests. We put this test Brian recommended. We put this thing down the well for about 30 or 45 days, and it shows that our bugs, it actually tested on the bacteria, and it showed that we went from anaerobic bacteria to aerobic bacteria, which is a positive development. So, in addition to that, the data we're collecting looks very positive. So,
Well, that was my question. What
We do want to make sure we get questions in from everybody, so let me finish up this question, but we need to move on to the next question.
So, what does the success look like in the biosparging process?
well, we're still in the process of evaluating that data, and then we look at the risk assessment and the real alternatives. So, we're in the middle of a pilot test. The initial data looks positive, and we'll have more when we get to probably our next meeting. We'll have a little bit more on that. We'll do so.
Thank you.
Cool, I have a couple of clarification questions. I didn't know that these, meetings were happening until they started reporting it in the news, so it's good to know that that's happening. But the oil LNAP recovery that you're doing in the well from the groundwater, that's LNAP that's been leaked into the groundwater? Is that right?
Yeah, from historical refinery
leaking anymore?
With any little bit we may spill these days, we clean up immediately. So very different times. The refinery's been there for 100 years. A majority of the time was prior to EPA regulations. A majority of the time was prior to RCRA regulations. So a majority of what we are cleaning up, whether that's with oil, groundwater that you're asking about, is historical refinery operations.
Well, some of you said you've been here for 40 years.
100 plus years.
So you said this has been going on since 2008, so how long how long until you've cleaned up all the oil?
That's a really good question. We're still working on it, so I don't really have a good estimate on how long. That's the reason we're trying to progress and expand the program, and working through the process,
So how well are these containment caps? Do you have data from testing the river where it's supposed to be stopping the oil from going into?
Our inspections are showing no sheen going into the river. And to go back to where you were at in my tenure out there, during the excavations for other maintenance activities or whatever, I've taken up redwood piping that they used to transport the oil in. In fact, in the early teens, 20s, crude oil was stored in just earthen pits. Screw pipe was used. There was not much control or care of whether they leaked a little bit because oil was very, very abundant at the time. So, just like everything else, that people have smartened up and wised up. And currently, right now,
And did you publish or do you have like a published data for the river water?
We just take care of, we're working within our permit off our POC wells and off of the record permit.
Who do we have?
So let me clarify, the containment caps prevent hydrocarbon sheen and oil from seeping into the river.
We don't know
That's
that.
their specific goals, and the south cap is working effectively. It's a proven patented technology. It's been put in by companies in about 5 to 10 other, at least 10 other locations, and it's very successful.
I guess my question is, how do you know it's successful?
Because you do an observation of the river water and in an area where at one time there was hydrocarbon sheen in the river.
So just like the alcohol test?
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't seem
Oh,
very
and there's a
safe.
second, and there's a second thing, and then we have monitoring wells around the walls, the containment cap. And if those monitoring wells don't have oil in them, and they continue to not show oil, then that oil is staying where it's at. Yeah, because the goal is to keep a hydrocarbon sheen is a visual thing, and so yeah, it's just a visual. That's just one part of what we're working on. So
We will gladly come back to people, but please keep your question to one at a time, and then if we have time, let's certainly come back to folks. So just a reminder, so we can get to as many people as possible. Who's next?
Hi, thank you very much. I did appreciate your presentation, Mr. Salam, right? I appreciated that. I thought I was wondering, what are we talking about? There's a lot of circumlocution in terms of like, what are we talking about here? And it's pollution. And I'm glad that, it was clear that it's historical pollution, so that's good. And we would like to get those numbers. My question, I guess, is what advice should you give to this community that they want to put a recreational body of water right next to that?
So we're working with DEQ, and our compliance points are the groundwater along the river, and that's our focus. So we're focusing on our groundwater that's under the refinery. We test it regularly. We've been testing about twice a year for about 13 years. We have lots of data. We're doing the pilot test you asked about, and our preliminary modeling data indicates no risk to humans in the environment in the river. That's preliminary data that we still need to submit to DEQ. And as I said on this slide here, we're still in this risk assessment stage, but we have preliminary modeling data that does not indicate any risk to the river from the groundwater of the refinery. Beyond that area that we're looking at, the groundwater of the refinery, I can't really speak to anything else. In the river receives a lot of inputs. It's a dynamic river. You guys all live here. It's got a lot of inputs that create what's in the river. So
Well, if I could just follow up, thank you, I think that's fair. The question was, what advice would you give this to the community? Not just to the DEQ, like this was the question. So be a good steward of the community, and I'm not saying you're not, but I'm saying that, that understand that there's a responsibility to, making sure that, hey, if they're gonna put a body of water in there, they're gonna have people swim in. Is that really a good idea for everybody? Do you want your kid in there? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just want to, that's a rhetorical question. But at some point, it's got to be real. But in any event, thank you very much.
Look, we take this seriously. We take our permit compliance seriously. We are part of the community. Right. For one, lived here 30+ years. So we are concerned. We're working with DEQ. It's a process. We're a 100-year-old refinery.
Right.
We're working through the steps. So it takes some time.
Thank you.
Thank you for questions.
Oh, go ahead.
You're gonna fight.
No, I'm not.
Hi, my name's Kelsey, and I'm a resident of Tulsa and a parent here as well. And so I was just wondering, does HF Sinclair derive any benefit from the impoundment of water behind Zink Dam? Like, does it help you guys?
It does not. So that's an interesting question, Kelsey. But no, we don't derive any benefit from the impoundment of the water behind Zink Dam.
Okay, and then this other question I have is for ODEQ. They're talking about progress, and I don't necessarily see it as progress to permit the impoundment of water, which will be a recreational space, the same place that there is an industrial. The river's being used for industrial purposes, right? Discharges into the river, and it doesn't seem like testing is being done because HF Sinclair's responsibility ends at the groundwater. So, ODEQ, where does your responsibility begin? And I would ask any representatives from the city of Tulsa that are here, perhaps, to participate in the answer of my question.
Well, first of all, we can't speak for the city of Tulsa and what their plans and how they have come to the decision, what they have on what kind of things are going to have happening in the river. As far as river water quality, we aren't water quality, we're land protection, so if you have questions about river water quality, then you can...
No, because it's not being tested for, or you're not requiring the city of Tulsa to test for it, is that right?
Well, they have point of compliance wells for the groundwater, so we know it's in the groundwater, and our goal is to ensure that the groundwater is at the groundwater protection standard, which is MCL. MCL is the maximum contaminant level, which is drinking water level. And so our goal is to ensure that HF Sinclair does cleanup to achieve those standards. And once those standards are achieved, that impacts the river.
So how much longer are you going to kick it down the road? I mean, progress is becomes, like mythical proportion when we never get there. What is the end goal, and what are you going to require them to meet in order to be at that end?
They need to meet the MCL at the point of compliance.
And when will that be?
Well, they'll have to do remediations, and as they said in this presentation, they're looking at biosparging right now. So if the data that they provide to us shows that this is something that's going to be beneficial and can work, they can expand it.
So is the answer you don't know?
If this isn't something that happens overnight, we would all like to see it cleaned up just like this, but that's not the way remediation works, unfortunately. So we want to see them achieve MCLs at the point of compliance. That's our goal. The RCRA permit is a permit to clean up the groundwater and the soil contamination at the sites. So, and it's an iterative process, as he showed on his presentation, and unfortunately, remediation just takes time.
I don't think that's acceptable.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question.
Yeah, it's when the water is really low. We were out on the river and walked out to the middle of the river because you could walk all the way across. It was that low. And that's when I discovered an oil seep in the riverbed itself. And it was about that big. And it was active. there was bubbles coming up through it, and I have been advised that was probably methane gas coming through. And from historical, anecdotal, is that early in the history of the river, there were many seeps like that because the wells that were drilled in the river, many were not capped, they were just abandoned. So how would we know, which is what I was thinking, where this seep in the middle of the river, the point of origin of it? If I could have done something to take a sample, I would have done that, but now it's covered in water. But that doesn't mean it goes away, it's still there. And so I'm concerned about whose purview is it to deal with the fact there's going to be seeps, there's going to be sheen that will show up in the Zink Lake area and probably up and down the river, which you are saying is not attached to the refinery. But how do you know that?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment on something you saw. My
Why?
advice to you when you see an issue like that is you call in a complaint to DEQ so we can go out and investigate it and determine, where it's coming from. That's really important. Otherwise, I can't guess on where that could have been coming from, or what you saw, or anything else like that.
I have photographs. I can give them to you.
Is it an abandoned oil well? Is that what you think it was?
Is it from H.F. Sinclair? Who knows?
We don't know.
That's the point.
All I know is it's live, it's bubbling up from the bottom of the riverbed, and and there's stories that there are many more of those out there. So I would think you could eliminate yourselves from that somehow by paying attention to the bed of the river. Or testing the water to see what
Ma'am,
what
do
the
you have a question,
hydrocarbons
or-
are.
Is there a question in there, or can we move on?
You can move on anytime you
I
like.
can address that real quick. So that's kind of outside the scope of this meeting and outside the RCRA permit stuff that's going on in the middle of the river that may be related to something else. You could still file a complaint. If it's an abandoned oil well, it's not going to be DEQ, it's going to be Oklahoma Corporation Commission. But you can still file a complaint. Nothing is stopping you from doing that because, quite frankly, we don't know about abandoned oil wells in the middle of the river. I mean, that's
Why not? There are maps that show the locations of these oil wells in the river.
Well, oil wells are regular in the Oklahoma Corporation Commission.
So what do you guys do?
I think we would want to make sure we're getting on the point of this particular meeting, and there's a lot of good questions, and we want to make sure we get to them.
You didn't talk about the West Refinery. The West Refinery has oil seeps like the East Refinery, except that they're in a less advantageous position regarding contaminating Zink Lake. So we got oil seeps, we got chemicals leaking out of the West Refinery, and you said nothing about it.
Yes,
What can
okay.
you say about the West Refinery? I should say that the evidence of these seeps are in the semi-annual reports. I believe your semi-annual report for the first half of 2023 is probably just about ready to be delivered to the City County Library. I encourage everybody to read the semi-annual reports to the degree you have the patience, because they're about 500 or 600 pages each. And I think if you're ignoring the West Refinery, you're really doing the city a disservice. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Fred. We are working through the West Refinery. I'll be anticipating when we have our next meeting, on the community update meeting like this, approximately every 6 months. We'll have some more discussion on the progress of the West Refinery, but I can tell you, one of those sheen areas, we're about to get, one of those areas with hydrocarbon sheen, we're about to get a work plan over to the DEQ. It's to repair an existing remedy that got damaged. And then the second area, we've just finished some additional, if you remember, I went through investigation, risk assessment, remedy. So we had to do some, we collected some additional investigation data in June and July. So we're on it, we're working on that. We anticipate sending that over to DEQ in the next couple of quarters, and we anticipate moving forward with some remedial ideas. We anticipate reaching out to our consultants. We use consultants in this business, and reaching out to them to develop some potential remedies for the other sheen that's called Area C5. Sounds like you're familiar with that. So we are working on both those areas, and we anticipate some progress for the next meeting. So I appreciate your interest in that.
Let's move up here to the front.
I'm Reese Moran, and concerned citizen, and I really do appreciate your diligence and, you know, and I know you work your butts off. I know you do. What confuses me, and maybe y'all can help me out, is that, and this, I hope this relates, that, you know, the refineries here, the HF Sinclair refineries rank number 96 in the country for water, toxic water emissions by the University of Massachusetts Center for Politics and Economy. And I'm reading it, the way the scores are computed, there's the amount of toxins that are released in the wastewater and times their score in terms of their toxicity. And, you know, from that information, you know, the refineries, or the HF Sinclair was ranked 96, but most of those chemicals actually are emitted here in Tulsa, especially in the, from the west refineries, 45,000 pounds released to the west facility. And I'm wondering how far those chemicals travel, and also, you know, want to understand when, you know, when you're talking about hydrocarbons leaking into the river, that, you know, there's no safe amounts. You know, for instance, selenium is, you know, toxic to the fish, and that is bioaccumulative, and, you know, can go up the food chain, and other nickel and other petrochemicals like benzene, which is, you know, carcinogenic, xylene, toluene, and I'm wondering, you know, is that coming out with the seepage? Is it coming out in the wastewater that will affect our lake, where people are swimming? And I think there's a lot of questions that we have, and I know that these meetings are set up to address certain questions, but I'd like for you to encourage you all to, you know, have other meetings where we can just be a little bit more conversational, where we can really understand, because when I read reports like this, it does concern me, and I know I drive a car, you know, I'm gonna, so I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, because I'm part of this whole system, and I want to, you know, show concern and respect for you. So, do you have that question?
What was the question?
Question is, what's in the you know, when there's hydrocarbons leaking, in addition to all the other pollution that's coming into the water, and all the, you know, whatever's coming in through the groundwater, which isn't even measured by this inventory. You know, what are the pollutants that are contained in hydrocarbons, and what do we know about their effect on wildlife and human health?
So, you know, as I said, no problem, Nancy. I can get you some answers on the record specific part of that question, which is going back to the groundwater. The containment caps, which we're very proud of. Brian's worked really hard at getting those in, keeps the sheen from getting into the river. And then, while we're working on that, I'd like to leave this slide up. We are working through the groundwater process. We recognize that there are volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds in the groundwater. We test them right along the riverbank and around the refinery. We have lots of data, so we're proud of that. We have lots of data on that. And you go through a risk assessment. You collect a lot of data, do some tests, and we're at that risk assessment stage. We have some preliminary data that doesn't indicate any risk from those volatile organics and semi-volatile organics in the groundwater to the river, but that's preliminary data. We're working with DEQ on a risk assessment, and that's where we evaluate under EPA's requirements for risk assessment. So there are requirements, and you follow things for risk assessment. That includes human health, it does include the environment, it does include fish and other things. So our focus is the groundwater, and then we'll evaluate that for
What
risk.
specifically, is that correct? Benzene, xylene, toluene, nickel, selenium, and other, what else might be?
There's no real inorganics. So selenium, nickel, not above any regulatory standards for those. But there are a few volatile organics, like benzene mentioned, and a few semi-volatile organics. So in there, they're right in those semi-annual reports. That's pretty easy to pull. I know they're long reports, but the majority of the pages in those reports, honestly, are the laboratory data. Most of the report that you'd be interested in is in the first 50 or 60 pages. So it's in there, and we're working on it. We're working really hard. You ask progress. These are things we've done in the last 6 to 12 months, and we're not stopping here. Now we got to do this, and now we got to do this green alternatives, and then we got to do these. We have to do these. Working with DEQ, that's in our permit. So.
Is there any like
We just,
plants or anything can grow or anything that,
do we have people that have not had a chance to ask a question? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No,
I wanna
you're
make sure
done
we
to
get that.
interrupt. That's okay.
Anybody else that has not asked a question? Oh, yeah?
My name is Mira Singh. I'm a resident near the river. I'm a mom, a concerned citizen. I asked this question at all of these meetings. Is there someone other than HF Sinclair testing the river water at Zink Lake area?
Again, we test the groundwater at a minimum every 6 months, and with respect to testing the river, I'm not aware of any testing in the river. So there may be, I'm not aware of it. So we test the groundwater. That's our.
And you were clear that you test up to the property of the refinery, but not in the river.
That's correct.
So there's no water testing happening of the river water in this area by where this recreational lake is getting built?
We can't say if there is or.
Or isn't, you don't know.
Well,
Because it's being
we
honest.
are citizens who are trying to find this out, and everyone is saying, no, it's not being tested. The city doesn't test it, the city of Tulsa doesn't test it, you guys are testing up to your property, but does anyone in the room know? Is there?
There's a city person here. City could talk.
Well, we want to make sure we're staying on task for tonight's meeting in terms of the RCRA program, so with HF Sinclair, so let me go back to that.
Yeah, this
I know.
is part of all of our, like a lot of
I
people's
certainly
concerns
appreciate it.
of why we're here.
And we've already spent a lot of time with a lot of questions, and so we want to make sure we get everyone's questions. We've got a half an hour left.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have two really simple questions. So first of all, how long has Sinclair owned those areas?
2010.
2010. And then my second question is, do you guys have jurisdiction, I don't know, do you guys check, like, because I know you keep saying the groundwater, did you guys ever, you have jurisdiction over, like, the bedrock? Does anything ever happen with whether or not it's seeping down into the bedrock, or if there's?
So conceptually, what we're dealing with here, which RC talked about in the presentation, would be things that are on the lighter end of the spectrum, meaning they're lighter than water. We do know from numerous investigations that the bedrock underneath, say, 20 to 30 feet or 40 feet in some places, the bedrock underneath, that alluvial layer, this kind of soil layer, is competent, which means it's not going to be very transmissive when it comes to allowing pollutants or really anything to move freely. So the fact that most of our contaminants are sitting on top of the groundwater table, and we have competent bedrock below, kind of leads us to the conclusion conceptually that there's not really an issue down there.
Anybody else who does not ask a question, want to ask a question?
Yes.
I'm glad you confirmed that.
But I'm sure we do.
And you use the refinery's wastewater system to treat the water, some of the water that you pump out of the groundwater? I believe if you don't know the answer to that question, read your semi-annual report.
In the West Refinery, the recovered groundwater goes to the wastewater treatment plant. Yes, sir.
You don't think it does in the East Refinery?
It does not.
We don't recover groundwater.
And I think all of us believe that HF Sinclair has an obligation to demonstrate that they meet the water quality standards of the state.
Let's just be careful. Any more questions?
Oh, that's okay. No, no, no. This is kind of a leftover question from an earlier meeting, which we were talking about the resilience or the ability of the containment cap to withstand the force of the water coming down from the Keystone Dam that is released. Sometimes just during flooding times, but it's pretty rapid. And so you, I believe it was you, sir, weren't sure about what it was, and what you quoted us was a very low number that it was tested for.
The last meeting, there was a little bit of confusion with our consultant and his numbers of where he's at. We have researched and gone back and found where, right now, the cap itself is designed for 277 CFS, and at 15, which far exceeds a 100-year flood.
277,000.
277,000.
Right.
And that's the riprap.
And that's the riprap, and then the ABM, the concrete matting over the top of it is 305,000 CFS. That's the design, and that's a two perfection.
Okay.
Two times protection factor. So.
Just to give you an idea, here's the riprap.
Right.
And I'll let Brian, this is the articulated block mat, the ABM.
Right.
At the south cap, and there's the riprap.
So
Sorry,
they're designed to a 1.5 times protection and a 2 times protection factor. A flood of 2019 comes down through there. That material is going to stay in place. Now that's barring a big oak tree that's been ripped out of the ground that's flowing through. I mean, that could be the same with the wind damage that we had just during the last storm. Right? So, but it is a proven technology. It's patented and it's designed and engineered. They're stamped and sealed by professional engineers. Very confident that we're not going to have any problems with either one of these in the future.
If there was to be a
Wait,
failure.
the next person, please, there's a person asking a question.
Okay. No, go ahead. No.
Just a question, this might be a little naive, but when they took down the pedestrian bridge and then built a new pedestrian bridge, I live right near there, so all the heavy equipment that came through, all those trucks, all this stuff, all the drilling, did they break up pipes or in some ways create more damage, that cracks or whatnot that could have led to more leakage? That's what I want to know.
There's no pipelines over in that area, so they did not hit any pipelines. There's no pipelines except for a natural gas line from ONG that runs about in the middle of our new cap right now that's into bedrock. And when they drilled all those piers, they were all cased and cemented in and towed in, keyed into bedrock. So there was no contamination of anything into bedrock or exposure to it. So the drilling was done under our supervision and guidance, and along with a work plan that was submitted to DEQ and approved.
I'm curious if DEQ or the refinery or any of these processes for this plan and these permits, have you notified or worked with or partnered with the Creek Nation in this at all? considering that the river is within reservation jurisdiction now.
Not that I'm aware of. I appreciate your question, and I'm not really aware of that. Are you?
You know, I mean, that's outside of the RCRA, part of this purview, but our response in other parts of the facility, yes, we do work with NCOG.
That's not.
No, that's not what she said.
Creek Nation of Oklahoma?
Not
It's not in.
I can't answer that question.
Is
That's
NCOG
well
pretending?
past where we're at.
Yeah, again, Brian and I, we're really focused on the RCRA program here, so.
So the tribe's not been involved in the river permitting process at all?
Not that we're, it's really between us and the DEQ, so. But I appreciate your question.
Okay, so I have a question. Okay, so basically, if there's any pollution coming, you know, as a result of whatever seepages or whatever untested for seepages are, or chemicals are in the river from HF Sinclair, if it's not ODEQ who enforces water quality standards in the Arkansas River in Tulsa, who does? And if it's not part of the RCRA permit, what program or what permit oversees water quality standards in the Arkansas River in Tulsa?
Water quality standards are recently moved from OWRB to DEQ's water quality division. Permanent rules come into effect, I think, next month, September.
Oh, perfect.
So our water quality division is the division that oversees that. And if you have questions about that, I encourage you can leave us your name and number. We can have somebody in our water quality division give you a call and talk to you about it. You can send me an email with your questions, and I can forward it to the person in water quality that handles it, and they can answer your questions for you.
So it's you guys.
It's DEQ.
Okay.
But they're land division. These representatives are with land division.
That's correct.
But their land pollution is polluting the river.
So what our focus on environmental work is very detailed as far as when you start looking at the different media, and that's why you tend to get people who are experts in certain areas. And so in land protection division, I've worked at DEQ for 26 years. My entire career has been in land protection division. So our focus is on cleanup of the groundwater, cleanup of the soil, then following the RCRA permit as far as maintenance of these closed LTUs that are in post-closure. And we want to make sure that they get the soil and the groundwater cleaned up to regulatory standards.
So maybe moving forward, you guys can connect that. This disconnect can disappear and you guys can talk across departments. It's what sounds like needs to happen.
Next question.
This is not a question. My name is Blake Ewing. I'm the mayor's chief of staff, and I just want to maybe clarify some things from our side. I know that there's a lot of concerns here, understandably, right? And part of why city staff isn't talking is that this isn't our meeting. This is this meeting, and I think we want to be respectful for this process and letting it unfold as it should. And I know that we're working on it is an unsatisfactory answer to you, but I hope that you understand that there isn't like a 24-hour switch that can be flipped that all of a sudden puts a testing protocol into place and all of that kind of stuff. So I've said before and will continue to say that we are working on it, and that solution, in our work on that solution, doesn't in any way disregard the concerns that are being brought forward. I think we've heard, like, you don't care what we're saying. We very much care what you're saying, and I would reiterate, so much so, that we are working on a comprehensive testing plan. We understand the responsibility that the city has to create a safe.
The city's responsible.
I'm sorry?
The city's responsible. Thank you. Thank you.
And don't call us a circus
No,
either.
it's okay. It's all right. But the city
Who
took
called
responsibility.
it a circus?
You did.
I called Ron Durbin a circus, and I'll call him that every day until he stops acting like a circus. I wasn't referring to you in any way, but if you act like Ron Durbin, I'll add you to the list, I guess. The point is, we are working to make sure that the recreational amenity in the river is something that you and your families can have confidence in, and that you can make informed decisions on for yourself based on readily available information. To make that happen, we know that means lots of conversation with other stakeholders along the river. It means lots of conversations with folks like the DEQ, with anybody and everybody from the dam to the Zink Dam, the Keystone Dam to the Zink Dam. That is work that we have to do. And we have committed to have a testing program that is communicated readily, available information often, and that by the time the river is open as a recreational amenity, those things will be in place. I can't tell you what that looks like today because, as I've said before, we're working on it. And I hope that you'll continue to see that as it unfolds. The city council and city staff will be having a meeting about this very thing in the next few weeks. It is a public meeting.
Good.
I know that there's like some kind of vitriol and suspicion or something that goes on. I would reiterate, just basic logic is that it would be the absolutely stupidest thing ever to disregard concerns about water quality in a recreational amenity. To like lie to you or whatever it is that you think we're doing. That's an almost asinine accusation. We would never. I'll say it again. If you think that we are lying to you about trying to have a safe river, that's insane. No one would do it. No one would subject our own children and our neighbors to a toxic, unsafe river.
You were at this last meeting and did not raise it. Instead, you raised inner tubes at City Council. You were at the last HF Sinclair meeting and you did not tell City Council what you heard here. Instead, you said you wanted amenities for tubing down that like toxic river. And ODEQ, I hope you're paying attention. This is the sort of gaslighting and violent language the public is subjected to.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yes.
Hey, we're gonna dial this back and we're gonna bring it back to the focus of tonight. I appreciate the comments from the city. Just to be very clear, those comments were made, that's great. We're not gonna direct questions at the mayor or the city this evening. Questions for tonight are for HF Sinclair or DEQ, so just a reminder.
So as we do this, as we get back to the conversation right here, I want to make sure your questions are geared toward the presentation. So if you can give me that commitment, I'll walk over to you.
You know, I'm concerned about climate change and the drought that has persisted.
Is this under threat?
Sir,
I'm asking.
I'm promising this.
Okay.
It was so anyway, you know, and fortunately we've had, you know, more water this year, thankfully. But what I understand is that drought and heat has been, you know, causing, you know, this water to be drawn towards the rivers. My understanding. And what I'm trying to understand is when you build one containment cap, and you know, and it sounds like you're finding that it's working, and then it starts to leak elsewhere. What is the mechanism that causes that to happen? And is there further risk of other spots needing remediation, especially in the long term as, you know, we deal with more drought and heat that is predicted by most climatologists?
Yeah, that's great.
Like, I like, is it like whack-a-mole? I'm just wondering, I hope it's not.
And it's not, and I appreciate your question, Nancy. The conditions of the south cap, that containment cap, has you stop, like by creating cap there, is stop the sheen in that area. The sheen north of Zink Dam, the hydrocarbon sheen to be specific, because there are other types of sheen. So the hydrocarbon sheen north of Zink Dam was not caused by the installation of the cap to the south. No, it didn't. It doesn't move like that. So what it is 100-year refinery, historical refinery operations, and where that south cap is and where that north cap is, there was residual oil in the ground. And as we do our inspections, in accordance to our permit, and we identify hydrocarbon sheens, Fred brought them up, that there are some at west, we are addressing those. And I will tell you that on that north cap sheen, we're gonna get that containment cap as a positive solution, put in, cost over $10 million, quite a bit over $10 million in 1 year. Is pretty, I think to a degree, pretty record time to get in a solution of that size. So we recognized an issue, and we're working toward a solution. Brian and I are super proud of that.
Concerned it could happen again, just wondered, I mean, or
Yeah.
just gonna find out. Just wondered.
That's what we do. I mean, yeah, we monitor the river, we check the river bank once a week with machines, according to our permit, and then if we have a hydro machine, we check it a little more often. But as we see conditions that say, hey, you need a remedy, we start working towards a remedy. So if there's somewhere else where we need a remedy, we recognize at West, we need, to do some remedies in those areas, we do it. So we recognize something south of the Zink Dam, and we put a cap in. We recognize something north of the Zink Dam, and recognize we had a really tight schedule, and put in the effort and got that cap in.
So here's my point. We have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes left in the meeting.
That's pretty cool.
We want to make sure we get to everybody here. So
Can't wait to see what happens there.
Our full bacteria.
So my question is, you guys keep saying these permits, and I'm sorry, this is my first meeting here. Well, like, is there like a timeline on how, like, when you do the permits, on when you will have set done, and I guess, yeah.
So within the permit, we manage our timelines on the next actions and the next actions. So.
Oh, so you have like step one done by set time,
Yeah.
and then you do another permit for step two?
We do the permits every 10 years. So for the East and West Refinery, I'm not sure if that's your question, but we update the permits every 10 years. And within those permits, there are requirements to achieve compliance, and there's requirements to